The rain poured over New York City like a curtain of silver tears that night. Inside the Marlowe diner, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of buttered toast and hope, the kind that clung to people who worked too hard and earned too little. Behind the counter stood Emma Carter, a young waitress with a smile that could melt any bad day. Her uniform was slightly faded, but her spirit wasn't. She worked double shifts, sometimes triple, just to keep her younger brother in school and the lights on in their tiny apartment. Outside, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled to a stop, its polished surface reflecting the neon diner sign. The door opened, and Alexander Grant, one of America's youngest billionaires, stepped out, a man whose name was whispered in boardrooms and printed on Forbes covers. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and carried the kind of arrogance that came from having never heard the word "no" in years. He wasn't supposed to be there. Billionaires didn't eat in roadside diners. But tonight, after a high-stakes board meeting where his senior advisors argued over investments worth billions, Alexander had felt something strange, emptiness. So he told his driver to stop anywhere. And fate, or perhaps irony, led him to the Marlowe diner. When he entered, every pair of eyes turned toward him. He looked out of place, his tailored suit glimmering under the dull yellow light, his watch probably worth more than the entire building. Emma glanced up, her smile flickering. She'd seen rich men before, but there was something different about this one. He didn't seem happy. "Table for one?" she asked, grabbing a menu with her usual cheerful tone. Alexander nodded, sitting near the window. "Sure. Surprise me with something good." Emma chuckled. "In that case, pancakes. Nobody ever regrets pancakes here." He smiled slightly, surprised by her confidence. "I'll trust your expertise, Miss Emma." "Emma Carter," she said, jotting down the order. "Emma," he repeated, like testing how her name felt. "All right, surprise me." As she walked away, Alexander leaned back and looked around, a mother feeding her child, a truck driver laughing with a friend, two teenagers sharing fries and dreams. Real life, he thought. Something he hadn't felt in years. When Emma returned with his plate, he watched her closely, not in the way rich men look at working women, but with quiet curiosity. Her apron had a small tear, her fingers had faint calluses, and yet her eyes shone with something money couldn't buy, determination. "So," he said, stirring his coffee, "do you ever give financial advice along with your pancakes?" Emma blinked, unsure if he was serious. "Excuse me?" He smirked. "You seem sharp. I could use some pointers. Say I've got a few billion lying around, what should I do with it?" The diner chuckled quietly. It sounded like a joke, and that's exactly what Alexander intended. He wanted to see how this waitress would react to a billionaire's playful arrogance. But Emma didn't laugh. She set the coffee pot down and leaned forward, her eyes meeting his. "First thing," she said softly. "Stop letting your money lie around. If it's not helping people, it's just paper pretending to be power." The diner went silent. Even the sound of the rain seemed to pause. Alexander froze, caught off guard. Nobody talked to him like that, certainly not a waitress. "Interesting answer," he said, covering his surprise with a smirk. "You sound like you've thought about this before." "I have," Emma replied. "I think about money every day. Mostly how to stretch $50 long enough to feed two people. But I also think about what I'd do if I ever had more. I'd invest in people, not numbers. The kind of people who just need one chance." Her voice was calm but firm, her words cutting deeper than she knew. Alexander found himself leaning forward, intrigued. "What do you mean by that?" "People like my brother," she said quietly. "He's 16. Brilliant kid. But since our parents died, I've been paying for everything, school, food, bills. He wants to be an engineer, but right now he's flipping burgers part-time. He just needs a chance, like millions of others who work hard but stay invisible. Alexander swallowed, unable to find a witty comeback. The billionaire, used to dominating conversations, suddenly felt small. He looked down at his untouched pancakes. "Maybe you should be running an investment firm," he said finally. Emma smiled faintly. "No. I just think money should make the world a little kinder, not colder." For the first time in a long while, Alexander laughed, a real, unpolished laugh. "You know, nobody in my circle talks like that. They only see returns, not people." "Then maybe you're in the wrong circle," she replied, picking up his empty coffee cup. The billionaire stared after her, her words echoing louder than the clinking dishes around him. Something in him shifted that night, a crack in the marble walls he'd built around himself. When the check came, Alexander noticed Emma had scribbled something on the napkin. "True wealth isn't measured by what you keep, but by what you give." He folded the napkin and slipped it into his pocket, something he'd never done before with anything written by a stranger. As he stepped outside, his driver opened the car door, but Alexander hesitated. He turned back toward the diner and watched Emma through the rain-slicked glass. She was laughing with another customer, wiping a table, exhausted but full of life. That night, Alexander didn't go home. He sat in his penthouse, staring out over the glittering city skyline, Emma's words looping in his head. Money should make the world kinder, not colder. He thought of all the foundations, investments, and donations he'd made, all for prestige, for headlines. None of it had ever felt real. But a waitress with torn sleeves and tired eyes had just taught him more about wealth than his Ivy League professors ever had. The next morning, the napkin was still in his hand. The words had dried into his memory. Alexander Grant, billionaire, visionary, and CEO of Grant Enterprises, made a decision that would soon shock his entire company. He was about to take advice from a waitress. And it would change both of their lives forever. 3 days passed, but Alexander Grant couldn't shake her voice from his mind. Emma Carter, a waitress from a diner nobody important had ever heard of, had said something that pierced straight through the thick fog of his wealth: "If it's not helping people, it's just paper pretending to be power." He'd replayed those words in his head during every meeting since. While his board members argued about profit margins, he found himself staring out the window, thinking about her brother who wanted to be an engineer. Thinking about people, not numbers. By the 4th day, Alexander had made up his mind. "Cancel the board meeting," he told his assistant abruptly. She blinked in confusion. "Sir, it's about the Q4 investment." "I said cancel it," he interrupted. "I have something more important to do." And for the first time in years, the billionaire who owned skyscrapers, ships, and half a dozen corporations, drove himself. The rain had stopped that morning. The sun broke through the clouds, painting the diner's windows with gold. Emma was there, as always, pouring coffee for regulars, her hair tied back, her uniform freshly pressed. When the bell above the door chimed and Alexander stepped in again, the entire diner fell silent for a moment. He wasn't wearing his suit this time, just a gray shirt and jeans, like an ordinary man. But his presence still commanded the room. Emma turned, surprised but smiling. "You again? Couldn't stay away from our pancakes?" "Something like that," Alexander said, taking the same seat by the window. "Actually, I came back for more advice." She laughed softly. "You really don't look like the kind of man who needs advice from a waitress." "On the contrary," he said, leaning forward. "You might be the only one who's given me something real in a long time." Emma paused, the humor fading into curiosity. "All right then, what's the question?" He pulled out a small notebook. "Let's say you suddenly had access to $10 million. What would you do with it, not for yourself, but for the world?" Emma hesitated, caught off guard. $10 million? He nodded. "Yes. And there's no wrong answer. Just, tell me what comes to your mind. She looked out the window for a long moment before answering. I'd start with education, she said softly. There are too many kids like my brother, smart, driven, but stuck because nobody helps them. I'd create scholarships, build training centers, fund programs for single moms who had to quit school. I'd give them a shot to stand again. Alexander's chest tightened. Her words weren't filled with greed or fantasy. Emma took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. But when she spoke, her voice was clear. I'm not here to talk numbers, she said. You all already know how to make money. I'm here to remind you why it matters. If your wealth doesn't change lives, if it doesn't lift people up, then it's just a cage made of gold. And one day, you'll realize you're trapped inside it. Silence. Then one of the older executives slowly nodded. Another followed. Within weeks, the Human Investment Project was launched, a fund dedicated to helping underprivileged youth, single mothers, and struggling entrepreneurs. It wasn't charity, it was empowerment. And every idea came straight from Emma's heart.